Tell us who you are, what you do.
Sure. My name is Seth Odell. I'm the founder and CEO of Kanahoma. We are a performance marketing agency that operates in the education industry. So we work primarily with colleges and universities that are looking to grow enrollment, and they partner with us, and we help them do that through paid media, brand creative, web management, kind of anything else they need.
That's awesome. How did you get started? Was this by accident? Did you work for an agency? How did you start the agency?
Great question. So I've been in the education industry and marketing for over 15 years when I founded the agency, mostly in-house. Most recently, I was a chief marketing officer at a university system here in San Diego. Prior to that, I was the general manager of an education agency, so I have some experience there. And essentially, I thought I wanted to become a CMO, and then I became one and realized that I wanted to keep pushing myself. And it felt like the next move was to set up your own shop and hang a shingle. And it kind of just came to me. I mean, I wanted to do it during COVID. I knew I wanted to in general, but my first client was UCLA, and they actually came to me with an opportunity. And it was sort of like a chance to land a big client and launch the business at the same time is kind of what sparked me to take the leap when I did.
When you started, especially with such a big client like that, how long did it take you to get your next couple clients? Because, when you start, you have this big client, you probably started hiring people, and then, that puts a lot of pressure, especially when all your eggs are in one basket.
Great question. So the first client was actually just me. So you say it was a consulting agreement. So that was perfect because it just covered my salary, covered my mortgage, and kind of paid most of my expenses. And so as soon as kind of launched, I did a bit of a launch plan. I sent letters out to about 50 people in the industry who have kind of helped me over the past 15 years. Sent them small gifts. I kind of put out some stuff on LinkedIn, let people know like, hey, I'm doing this finally. And most of it came in through referrals. So within the first few weeks, we landed a second consulting client, which was a smaller art school out of the Northeast. And then McKinsey, the consulting company, actually referred a client to me, which was really I knew someone there, and the work was obviously way too small for them. And they're like, great, we know someone with a small shop that'll take stuff that we won't do. And they passed me a client. And so it was only about a month in, or maybe 6 weeks in, that I had 3 clients. I was still at that time just juggling it with myself and some contract support. So it was still pretty nascent at that time.
I like the low-hanging fruit strategy and the tactic, especially with the letter. You were like, a letter. I sent out a letter.
Yeah.
So what did it say on this letter?
I'd be happy to share, because this is like my advice I give to everybody who wants to start a business. I basically wrote like a 4-paragraph letter. First paragraph says, hey, wanted to reach out, let you know I'm launching this thing. Second paragraph was basically, over the course of before I've been launching this, I've been reflecting on the course of my career and realizing that, people have made a big influence. And the third paragraph was this custom graph I wrote for each person, which was, what's the lesson that I learned from them over my career, something that they taught me. And then the fourth one was saying I enclosed a small gift where I made these banners with a quote from Phil Knight, the founder of Nike, that says, that leaves us. And it was like, I'm realizing even though I'm going alone, thanks to people like you, I feel like I have support. And so it was like a template letter, but the third paragraph was totally personalized. And I wrote 50 versions of it and mailed it out. And it was all sincere. It was just like, hey, I'm launching a business. And some of them didn't come to anything, and other ones directly referred me work. But the key thing was I sent it before I announced the business. So when I went and announced the business publicly, it's like I had 50 people like rooting for me who all posted on my LinkedIn and were all excited. And the post ended up becoming like the most viewed post in the education industry, which is our little niche, that week that I put it out there. So it was sort of like, it was personal and it worked. I told everybody, like, chum the waters, like send out something like that. And to your point though, I think the fact that it was a letter and not an email, and that it was personal is really, I think, what helped it.
Well, it's different too. Like, everyone thinks, how can I do the thing that's the easiest for me? And I think when it's easy for you or viewed as easy for you, you shouldn't do it. You should do the opposite. Like, if someone gets something and they're like, man, like, for example, we had one of our events in Austin, and one of the attendees loved it, had such a good time, and they sent me a thank you gift. They knew that I just started flying and got my pilot's license. They had this commissioned thing of like this metal thing you hang up on the wall of a plane, and it had my name and the year. Like, it was just personalized. And I was like, that took some thought, right? I'm always going to remember that and share that, like, versus sending an email, thanks for the great time.
Totally. Yeah. And I totally am aligned with that. And I really think like people want to root for each other. So it's like being kind and taking the time to send those things out. Like now you have a connection to that person, and when they have something going on 2 years from now, you're going to be so excited for them and genuinely, right? Like you're like, oh my gosh, I'm so pumped for you. And so I think there's a sense of like, if you take the time to give, it'll probably come back in its own form on its own timeline. So that's a great example of something that totally can land.
So let's kind of fast forward a little bit, maybe a year and a half, or maybe even two from starting out. What are some of the
Yeah.
other things that you did to help you scale to, a multi-million dollar agency? Like, what are some of the other low-hanging fruit items?
Yeah, it's a great question. I think the first thing is being really intentional about products and offerings. And so, I started really more as a consulting company because it was me and I could hire some contractors. And so I was doing some project based creative work and some marketing strategy. And it was probably about 4 months in that I got offered a really large consulting contract. And I was talking to my wife about it. And I'm like, if I say yes to this, I'm basically done. I've sold like 65 hours a week and I'll make great money, way more money than I was making before. And I was like, but this isn't really what I want to build. And so I ended up turning down that work and really intentionally pursuing paid media and performance marketing, both because it was an area I was familiar with, but also because I felt like that was the path to retainer work. And I knew I pretty quickly wanted to break off of project-based work. So one was, we could talk about that more because that was a big factor in our revenue push, but one is being intentional about your products. The other then to me was really, you have to, I got great advice from someone, don't hire till it hurts. So like, build up cash in the business, make sure you have a healthy business day one. But then when I did hire, I overhired for most positions. And that was a little bit of a risk, but I hired people that I knew, that I trusted, that I've worked with before often, that were probably overqualified for the role, but I knew could grow into it. And so like, there's a woman who works with me today who has, 20 plus or 20 plus people reporting underneath her. When she started, she had no direct reports. Right. And so like, I'd overhired her. She had previously had a big team. She came down to one and she's worked her way all up as we've scaled. And so I think be intentional about products, manage your cash flow. I mean, we're businesses that are built on cash. And so I was always very serious about accounts receivable and trying to get paid, overhire. And the other one I'll say is, try to charge as much as you reasonably can. We made an intentional decision early on to position on premium. And the concept was, I'm going to charge you more. So we're going to be the newest agency in our space and we're going to charge more than everybody else, which feels counterintuitive. But the reality is that what people are buying is not just service. When it comes to performance marketing, they're buying confidence in future results. And so, they want to make sure that it's going to work. And so we would charge more. By charging more, I could hire better teams like that individual I mentioned. Better teams then directly drive better performance. The better performance builds a better reputation, which gets people interested in us, which allows us to keep higher prices. And so it hasn't always been the case. We're not always way above the market rate, but we are generally priced higher. And I think, I'm glad I made that decision early on because it's sort of counterintuitive. You think the less you charge, the faster you can grow. But ultimately, we decided to charge more, and we turned down probably half the work that came to us in the first couple of years because it wasn't a great fit or the budget wasn't there. And in hindsight, I'm really, really glad we did that. I don't know that I was as intentional as I'm saying it now. I think we were, but like in hindsight, that's probably the smartest move was like, charge a lot, make sure you have the resources then to deploy great people against those, against the projects that you're taking on. And hopefully somewhere in there, you make it out on top.
Yeah, one of the things I'm always telling our mastermind members is, what do you need to do or what needs to happen in order for you to raise your prices where
Mm.
people are like questioning not your price, but questioning all the other people because they're too low?
Yeah, totally. I totally agree. And I always tell people if you're not losing a percentage of work due to price, you're priced too low. That like losing work due to price is an indicator that you're priced correctly. So the only question is, what percentage of new business do you want to lose based on price? And so, like, I don't know the right metric. We always said 20%. So it's like we want to lose 20% of deals because we're too expensive, and that'll at least indicate that that we're somewhere in the right ballpark. But
Yep.
I think you're just spot on with that advice too.
There's a lot of people listening that have been on kind of project work
Hmm.
or kind of like a fixed retainer.
Yeah,
And they've always been very interested. I've interviewed other people from, Tom Breeze, who is a total performance agency,
yeah.
to like hybrid models and that kind of stuff. So walk us through kind of your process. Do like, do you have like an offering ladder where you test someone out, like for a paid engagement, and then that goes to another one, and then you're like, oh wow, I really can generate a ton of leads at this price. Let's do a performance deal. Or
Mm,
do you just go straight to the performance deal?
that's a great question. So we do it a bit in reverse. We have historically gone straight to the agency of record kind of a model for essentially we're primarily doing digital marketing, mostly Google ads, Facebook ads. And so, we if possible, we want to start with a 12-month contract. And we start there with people if we can. And that's worked for us. Mostly it's worked because a lot of the people are switching agencies. So it's like, it's like a hot swap. They already have a shop and they're moving to us. For those folks, they tend to already be used to longer term contracts. And so it's not as big a deal. So if we're where we can, we sell AOR 12-month contracts first. Where we can't, we are willing to do a pilot. We try to keep our pilots to 6 months. We've occasionally done less, mostly because in our space, the bake time between becoming a lead and enrolling as a student is pretty long. It can take 60 to 90 days. And so it's not a quick sale like e-commerce. So we will sell pilots if we have to. And only recently have we begun to sell paid media audits, where we're willing to come in and just look at your account, do a bunch of consulting work. I've actually historically not done that. And so we started on the high end. And then as we've scaled, we've been kind of backing out of that because obviously, we're looking to drive, more top line revenue. And so we've had to concede a little bit on that, but we started with 12 months first out of the gate.
Have you taken on clients that you're like, man, there's no, like, these people are pain in the asses. And like, I wish we really tested this out first to avoid that rather than being in bed with them for at least a year?
There have been a couple occasions, not many. We talk about something internally where we say, we only want to play winnable games. And so we'll talk to leadership about, like, can we win here? And the reason is, like, I turned down a huge account of over $1 million a year in revenue because the client's paid expectations were unrealistic. And we're like, we're not going to be able to drive your cost per acquisition. And it's like, you'll keep us for a year and then you're going to fire us. And then you're going to tell everybody that we weren't that good. And it's like, it's not worth chasing that. I think a lot of our competitors are willing to churn that revenue. And our growth strategy is retention, right? If we can keep clients for 5 to 10 years, which in our industry is actually achievable, conceptually, we think we can become one of the largest shops through retention more than net new business. So mostly that, like, is this a winnable game, has solved for most of it. But there have been a couple occasions where we didn't have right fit and we've ended up having to resign a couple accounts. And so it hasn't been perfect. And I do think that's where I think the idea of, like, doing some more pilots or paid media audits could be helpful, to sort of like have a feeling out process with clients. The other one is even just understanding their data on paid, CRM integration and making sure that reporting is strong is key. We don't always have the ability to assess the caliber of the technical talent on our clients' side. And we rely on them a lot because they don't always give us access to their CRMs because it's, it's personal identifiable information. And so we sometimes, you do find yourself midstream. So for the most part, it's worked out for us, but it hasn't been flawless. And so I'm hoping our move into some of those audits and pilots may give us that feeling out period that you're referencing.
The one thing I'll tell you that I think will help you out tremendously is don't call it an audit. No one wants to be audited, right?
Oh, okay.
Right? No one wants to be told what they're doing bad, but they do want to know their opportunities or how they can actually grow. Like, for example, I call these, and I like that you're doing a paid one because you're taking the risk down, right? Rather than going to this huge commitment.
Totally.
And you're making it less risky. It's a way where you can build, trust very easily. We do what we call our agency blueprint. Like an agency blueprint, we're going to look at where you're at, where you're going, what's your biggest challenges, and we're going to lay out a plan that you can go take, you can go do, right? It's like some action thing. Rather than an agency audit. Like if I said, Seth, I'm going to do an agency audit for you, you're going to be like, are you going to dive into, you're going to tell me all the shit I'm doing bad? Like,
I love that. That's so good. I wrote down, like, maybe it's like a paid media playbook, and it's like, we're going to assess where you are and give you the playbook we would do if we were in charge. And to your point, you can hire us to do it or take it and run with it yourself or use it to manage your own agency better. I appreciate that. That's phenomenal. And I think your point on de-risking is so huge because that is, I think, one of the biggest challenges is, like, how do you reduce the potential risk and the downside? One of the things that we figured out in our contracts that might be helpful for listeners is I've been able to move most of our paid media clients to 3-year contracts. And one of the ways that I've done that is I've offered them 3-year contracts at a discount, like 10% off, and I offer them a rolling 90-day out. And the rolling 90-day out feels like it's de-risk to the client. They're like, oh, so really I can leave any time in 90-day notice. But what we all know is that once you're in the throes of things with people, 90-day notice to an agency is a long time, and that actually makes people a little bit concerned. So what it creates is a sense of they're willing to sign up longer up front, which means I've navigated around procurement and around finance. We've locked in our terms for 3 years, so the lawyers don't have to get involved again. The client does have a 90-day out, so it is more freedom to them. But I also know that if once we're midstream, if they have a concern, 90 days is painful enough that they're going to tell us if there's a concern that they have. Yeah, and we have a 90 days to fix it. And so, knock on wood, we're only 3.5 years into the agency, but so far that's worked. And we've gotten, we have significant, like 8 figures locked in and under contract for the next 3 years because of that. And so, what's only jury that's out now is like who or how many will ever utilize that 90-day out, or will that successfully essentially turn into true 3-year deals?
I like the 90-day out. When you were telling me that before you were explaining to me, I was like, well, if you ever have envisions to sell the agency, like that's going to be a huge, like, yeah, you have 3-year contracts, but they can cancel and the predictability is not there. But if you honestly could show me and going, well, here's the data, like we've saved all these accounts, because now what you're doing is you're basically saying like they're raising their hand saying, hey, I don't like this one thing. But if you can't fix it in 90 days, you should let them go anyway.
Totally. Or they should have the right. And exactly. And that's, I some private equity before I actually implement it, because I had the same concern. And again, what they basically said was exactly what you just said. Ultimately, we would judge it based on the reality of the tenure. So if you can just show us these people have signed it and not used it, then we'll treat it like a long-term contract. But the risk is on you that if you launch this and then everybody uses it on you, then we're going to consider it. So I got that same feedback that it's sort of like, okay, well, let's see. And to me, that main point has been, if you get a 90-day out, we should be able to fix any problem in a quarter, or we didn't manage expectations properly in the new business and sales process.
Yeah, because it always comes down to, either a wrong prospect or a wrong process. It's not a bad
Really
agency
good.
client,
really
right?
good.
Like
Yeah.
it's, we let the wrong person in, we told them the wrong thing, or we didn't manage
Yeah.
expectations.
Yeah.
One of the things I always, and feel free to use this too with your foot in the door, like you said, hey, we're going to build you a plan. You can go use it somewhere else. I'd always make it very, very easy for them to understand. I'd say, here's 3 possible outcomes, Seth. You'll love the plan, you go execute it yourself. Number 2, you'll love the plan, which is the most common, and you'll want to work with us, which we'll talk about. Number 3, you don't like the plan, I'll give you your money back. So there's nothing for you to lose.
Oh my gosh, that's really that's fantastic. I stand by our work product a lot. I really believe in, like, we're trying to build a better agent. There's about 40 competitors in our space. Most of them have been around a long time, and respectfully to them, I just don't think they're as modern or kind of providing the kind of solutions that are needed. I would love that kind of a guarantee. I would feel comfortable selling that and standing by that.
With your new playbook that you sell, how much time do you put into that?
That's actually, we were just talking about that yesterday with my leadership group, and that's still where we're trying to figure that out. Obviously, the biggest thing that we talked about was more than time was the velocity, meaning that our clients really want something back in 30 days. But for us to do a really high quality product, we were like, we really want 6 weeks, maybe a little longer, and it could take us 40 to 60 hours, but we have other client work. So what we talked about is probably it's a 50-hour project. Maybe we can do it in a little less. We'd love to use technology to do it faster. And so we're talking about, like, how do we create a light version of it? Pareto principle, right? 20% of your input gets 80% of the output. We tend to be a little bit perfectionist here. So I don't have a great answer for that. It's probably a little bit of an area that we're still rounding out, which is like, how fast and lean could we do this and still provide that value so we could get this kind of a solution in front of more people?
One of the things that I found is the best foot in the doors that are working for businesses and agencies are done with the client. And what that's designed to do is build trust and make them feel like they're building it, and then they're invested in it. So if you can think about your project now, slice off 2 hours that you can spend with these higher education or these colleges, these universities, to do with them. And all
Mm,
it's designed to do is have them pinpoint the biggest problems
mm,
or the biggest challenge. And then that foot in the door is designed to highlight that project that you're going to go do without them. So it's kind
yeah,
of 3 levels, because then the foot in the door is easy, right? Like, you don't have to send a
yeah,
proposal, especially like probably with your pilot program. You still probably have to get approval from all the committees and all this, because it's over a certain amount.
mm,
It requires all these people. But the foot in the door, you charge like a couple thousand. They literally go to
yeah,
an order page, put it in,
mm,
your automation happens, you set up the meeting, you have the meeting. That meeting helps them, but designed to sell the pilot,
yeah,
and then the pilot sells the retainer.
yeah, yeah. Yeah,
I
that's great. I mean, it's so I feel like we backed into this the wrong way, and we got lucky. It worked, and we've scaled. But this is exactly the kind of thing I think we need to be able to go off for a larger piece of the market. I mean, there's 4,000 colleges and universities in the U.S. It's a huge market,
It's a huge market,
and so
and
we
they got
always say,
lots of money.
yeah, they do. I mean, there's so many that are spending tens of millions of dollars in marketing because the cost of tuition is so high. The cost of acquisition is also very high. A lot of schools are willing to spend $5,000 to acquire an online student, as an example. And so there's a lot of room and opportunity here. This approach makes a lot of sense.
Yeah. What's something that surprised you over the past 3 years, growing this agency,
Mm.
that that you would go back and tell yourself, hey, avoid this?
That's a great question. I think there's a few. There's some like tactical and a bigger one. The tactical would be like, always be wary when I sell myself. So as a founder, it's like, when are you selling you versus when are you selling the solution? I was so involved in the sales process that people would assume I'd be involved in product delivery. And in the early days, I did everything, was involved in everything. And then as we scaled and we got up to, more than 10 clients, it's like, I'm not anymore. And then I tried to ease off, and I didn't manage those expectations that well because I hadn't thought about it. And so, I had a conversation with a former president that I used to work with. And he said to me, he said, if you're building a really good agency, your team should be better than you, and I should want your team and not you. He's like, so what you need to do in the sales process is explain the solution that you've built. Like, you're the product architect, but then the product is the team. And he's like, and I hadn't been doing that. Now we do that, and it's much better, where it's like, hey, here's why I founded the business. Here's our approach to agency of record or digital marketing or creative. And here's the amazing team that executes that way better than I could. You don't want me to do it. You want them to do it. But like, you can trust that like I saw this opportunity and built this team. That's probably one of the biggest ones, and that caused a rub because I think the clients, when you're really small in a small business, they are choosing a small agency oftentimes because they want the higher attention and customer service. They want to be able to text you, know that you'll show up when they need them, get on a phone with somebody, their president or board member. And like, our team still does that and provides that level of service, but I personally can't do that on all accounts anymore. And that's probably one. And the second one I'd just say is like just how hard it is and how stressful it is. My last job, I had 70 people under me. I had a huge in-house agency spending tens of millions of dollars in marketing. And this job is so much harder than that, because in this job, I'm also, running HR and legal and finance. And I'm worried about, the bank is not approving my ACH payment to some vendor. And, I have an IT issue and I don't have any IT people. And like, there's all these things that aren't marketing. And I've grossly underestimated the mental load that it takes to run a business, because I'm not an agency owner, I'm a business owner. And it just so happens that the business I own is an agency.
Yeah, it's
I was not prepared for that at all either. That was hard.
well, yeah. I mean, my first client, because I fell into this business by accident. My first client asked me to send him an invoice in '99. I didn't know what an invoice was.
Yeah, I had no idea how to do an invoice. I was like, I Googled like free invoice templates. So I'm like trying to
I
figure it
didn't
out.
have Google, Seth.
Yeah, that's true. I don't know how you did it then, because that's been my like probably my right hand man has been Google this whole way through.
But the one thing that I wish I learned quicker was, if I outline everything I love doing in the agency that gives me energy, and then
Mm,
I outline everything I hate doing, and then I go, do I have to do it? Can I use technology to do it? Or can I hire someone to go do it?
totally.
right? Like the bookkeeping, the HR, like
Yeah.
like, I know those were just examples, but like
Yeah.
those are little solutions. Like and I would always look at it too of going, every month, how do I shed off one layer, one
Yeah.
thing that I'm doing now that I don't need to do?
Yeah.
And then it will start giving you a little bit more sanity to concentrate on the things that you really love doing. Um,
Totally. I
because it's
love
a
that. So I just sorry, I just would add, I didn't realize that it's not that hard to do that today. There's so many fractional services. So I
yes,
learned way into my business that like, oh, I can hire a fractional IT firm. Like today we have a fractional IT firm. I have a fractional CFO. We have a fractional HR, head of HR from a big HR services company.
yeah,
We have a great law firm on a retainer, and now I have a controller and a director of business ops that manages all those folks for
yeah.
me. But I didn't realize this. So I was like, how am I'm gonna have to do HR till we're 50 employees and I could hire. It's like, no, like you can hire a fractional HR person when you're 5 people. Like I just had no idea. I think, there's just so much of that I just didn't realize at all.
Well, because we're all in the weeds, we're just so in the weeds, we can't see through anything else. But that's the beauty about business. You're always learning. It's always humbling you when you think you figured it out, and you're like, I am the master of this. It
Yeah,
kicks you in the pants, and then you're
totally.
like, oh no, it's not.
Yeah, and I think like realizing that like we can learn a lot from that. Like I struggled with the business in the first couple of years because I think I had some like underlying fears. Like I had the fear of not being enough, or the things that weren't fear that things weren't okay. And I was having to try to build this agency really fast and big to prove something to somebody for some reason. And so I
Prove
went
to
on.
who? Who are you trying to
It,
prove it to?
I honestly don't know. It's like this chip on my shoulder, this like collective career sense of like I need to show everybody how good I am and what I can do. And I don't know if it was one
Who
person in my
who
past or
who
general.
ignored you? Who ignored you when you worked for them?
Oh, I mean, definitely there's like 2 or 3 bosses. That's a good
I
point. There's
know it.
one,
Yeah.
yeah, one early in my career and one more recent,
Mhm.
that didn't give me the runway, I think, where I could have provided the value I knew was possible.
And,
Yeah, that's
and
good.
yeah, because I look back at mine too. Like that motivated me. And
Yeah,
then I remember even chatting with someone. They were like, "I want to get to 10 million just so I can tell people to shove it." That
yeah,
doubted me. I said, "Well, how long have you been doing the business?" They're like, "Probably around like you, 3 years."
yeah,
And I'm like, "And your business is 6 million?" Like just like you, right? And I'd be
yeah,
like, "All right, I want you to look up how many businesses make it past a year. How many businesses make it to 6 million? You can
yeah.
tell them to go shove it right now."
Yeah, totally. And I was just it's so true. What 5% of businesses make it past a million, one less than 1% make it past 10. You're totally right. I went on this mindful leadership retreat last year that was put on by a gentleman named Peter Corbett, who built an agency called iStrategy, and now he's more of like a mindful leadership person. And a lot of that helped me uncover that like fear was my fuel, and it was like I was so angry and afraid of these different things. And so it's been interesting working through that, and it's been hard. But I also think that like nothing challenges you like building a business, maybe outside of maybe having a kid. And it's like, okay, so lean
That's
in
way
and listen to
harder.
this stuff. Yeah, it is. I mean, my daughter's 3.5 and doesn't listen to anything I say. So that's the hardest. But I'll say there's something about like, as hard as it is building this business is like taking time to listen to yourself and learn. I don't think I appreciated the kind of growth that I would get to go through. Like the business would grow, but like, it's hard to build a business like this and not personally grow in one way, one direction or the other. And if you do it right, you can learn from it and get stronger. But otherwise, those vices are going to come back, and it's stressful, man. It's a
Yeah.
hard thing to do.
Well, it's definitely a hard thing, but it's well worth it, and
Yeah,
it's very rewarding if you do it, if you have the right mindset. But Seth, I want to thank you so much for coming on the show, and for all of you listening. If you guys are looking for your tribe of other agency owners and looking for people that understand what you're going through, that can share the strategies that you can kind of build on in order to get to where you're going and enjoy it a lot more, we'd love to invite you to check out our mastermind. Just go to agencymastery360.com, click on the scale, give us 45 minutes. We'll look at where you're going, where you're at, what your biggest challenge is. If we can help you out, we'll talk more about it. If not, we'll point you in the right direction. But go there, and until next time, have a swank day. I hope you enjoyed this content. If you want more content like this, make sure you click on the link on the screen or check out your most popular podcast platform where the full episode is there. And until next time, have a swank day. What are you doing? Go check it